Hello. You caught me drinking water. Hope peoples are out there. I missed last week because I was on planes, trains, and automobiles, and now I'm coming at you from a whole nother side of the country. And I don't see anybody here yet, but that may change soon. Hello, Mandy. I see you. Yes, I see you. It is good to see you, Mandy Ryan and Trudy Anderson. Good morning. Yes, it's morning somewhere. Wendy! Wendy's in the same time zone with me now. It's so nice. Hi, Adriana. So good to have you here. Oh, now people's popping in all over. Teresa, hello from Andover. Back at ya. Ooh, Trudy, Sydney, yes, hello. That's why you said good morning. Hi, Donna. You're off your game, hon. Lots of people here already. Alexa from New Jersey. That's where I am, New Jersey right now. Yay. Yay. I'm not going to stay here forever. Oh, Laura O'Connor says local peeps. Yay. Hello, Laura. And Laurel. And Trisha. How you doing, sweetheart? Great poet, Trisha Elliott, and Laura O'Connor as well. Jordy from Melbourne, woo! And Casey from North Carolina. This is so nice to all be together. Hello, Maureen from BC, British Columbia. I'm going from Norway, woo-ha! Must be late there. Hi, Sophie, I missed you too. Look at the little sheepy sheep, that's so sweet. Which one is you, Sophie? Is that cute sheep? Rosie from Glasgow. So good to have you. Oh my goodness. Okay, we've got way over 100 people. So people are still coming in, but I want to get to our topic today. So the topic is a modest one. How do you get out of hell? Well, first of all, I want to say that I don't believe that there is an actual physical hell where people get tortured. There have been over 20,000 cases of near-death experiences where people have reported various mystical occurrences, and in a total of one, somebody felt like he was being pulled down to hell. That person was a drug addict dying of an overdose, so I'm not sure whether his experience was influenced by chemicals. In a lot of cases, when people did not have chemicals in them, they were initially a little frightened by what happened to them after death, but immediately met by a light that had no judgment in it whatsoever. So I just think the stuff about you're being bad, you're going to hell, no, it doesn't wash for me at all. But there is a thing that I call hell, and that is a human mind that is locked in suffering. And that, brothers and sisters, is nothing to sneeze at. It is agony on a scale that I think possibly no other species is able to feel, because we can add on to our legitimate pain that's coming from circumstances these terrifying stories of the future. I think a lot of you have heard me say that there was a group of psychologists who set out to answer the question, why do humans kill themselves when no other animals do? I've talked about this before. And the answer is that we're able to use language to create, that was Rowie. Hi, Rowie. Hi. To create abstractions of the future and how the pain is going to continue. And also resentment about the past. So if you've heard of the god Odin of the Norse, we've got some Scandinavians here today. The Norse god Odin had two ravens on his shoulders. One was named Hugin and one was Munin. And they mean thought and memory. And they were always like giving him news in his ears. And this is an angry, dark god who in the end will just die horribly and the sun will be eaten and everyone will, freeze to death. The reason I think it was so pessimistic is because thought and memory, if you think of memory and imagination, if they're not handled in a certain way, they become resentment and regret from the past and absolute total fear for the future. And this drives all the desperate climbing behavior we see in our culture, which after all was highly influenced by Scandinavia and that whole worldview. So when you're listening to thought and memory and imagination in a way that doesn't purify consciousness, you get dragged into hell. and it's a spot inside your head. And people used to tell me when I was depressed as a teenager, it's all in your head. And I would be like, great, could you please take it out? I had no way to get out. I was just in constant suffering. And now I'm 1,000 years old. I've sort of learned why. And I've also learned some methods for short-circuiting hell when it starts to arise in my own consciousness. The whole, I've been moving, and we had all kinds of real estate, like weird things happening, and a lot of physical pain. I got an ulcer. It was like, ooh, I got all bruised all over from moving boxes and things. But most importantly, I had uncertainties and fears that were making me tense and tight. And I knew if I was going, do you need to do something? Okay. I knew if I was going to live productively and go through this transition with as little pain as possible, that I needed to get out of hell. The hell in my own head. And here's how I do it. And I would like to invite you to join me with anything that may be a concern of yours right now, anything that's causing you suffering. First of all, you get grounded in the present and make your body comfortable. We've talked about this a million times. Without making the body comfortable, you're not offering the animal part of yourself the simple kindness of care. And that is the basis on which you need to build the rest. If you are locked in a prison, still do anything you can to make yourself as comfortable as possible. Anything. Shift around, get a pillow, get a cup of tea, curl in a ball, whatever makes your body more comfortable. And then you're ready to do the inward mental exercise. It starts by imagining your whole inner self, so your body and your mind and your emotions and everything, as a big valley. I am in a part of New Jersey. We won't live here. We're going to live in Pennsylvania, but our house isn't ready yet. So we're bunking with a friend. And it's right around the area where George Washington crossed the Delaware River, for those of you who don't know American history, like the Americans. No, sorry. We sort of know history. But George Washington crossed the Delaware here and had his first victory in the Revolutionary War. And Valley Forge is not far away, I don't think. I don't know, correct me where I'm wrong. But the Valley Forge experience is kind of mythological almost in the American consciousness. It was this horrible, horrible winter that George Washington and his troops had to shack up in this incredibly freezing cold valley. And as you know, heat rises. So in the valley, it was colder than up on the heights. So it was a miserable place and a miserable winter. And they just were stuck there. So imagine this valley shape, a big valley. And if you're in a lot of pain, you can imagine it dark and cold and horrible like Valley Forge. Now, the first thing you want to do is you'll find yourself pulling away from this valley of pain. What you want to do instead is just imagine that you're George Washington and you're going in with your troops, and they need to know that you are with them. Like all the parts of you need to know that you are going to be with them. That is the first comfort you can get. And the way you go with them is you lean into whatever pain you're experiencing it and you name it. We've done this before. Anxiety, frustration, loss, grief, agony, rage, whatever it is, you lean into it and you imagine the whole valley now being flooded with one quality inside your psyche, and that quality is equanimity. I was just talking to our friend whose house this is, and she took a course once in tightrope walking, well, clown things, circus things, and she learned to walk a tightrope. And the teacher told her, if I remember this rightly, that being balanced means being equally willing to fall in any direction. You're not bracing against any place in the whole 360 degrees. You're equally willing to fall, no matter where you fall. And because you're equally willing to fall in all directions, you manage to hold your balance, hold your state of being. So that's what equanimity is. It's like, there's a net under me. I'm going to, imagine if you want to, that there's something that's going to catch you. And that you can, even if you fall in any direction, it's going to be a fall. You're going to land. It's going to be okay. And then you may be able to stay upright. You may not. You may fall down and spend a few days lying in bed sucking your thumb. I've done that. Okay, after a few days, I get up. But it's so much easier if you watch the valley of your pain and imagine the equanimity, calm as water that rushes in. And say that the pain is like broken glass or sand or something. It fills the whole valley. And the equanimity is water flooding the whole thing. Warm, like room temperature water. It's not cold, it's not hot, it's not extreme in any way. It's peaceful. And it's not the same part of you that's feeling the pain. So it may take a while to find the equanimity. And the equanimity says, I'm willing to fall. That's all it is. There's a part of you that's like, oh, I don't even care. You know how when you've been pushing and pushing and pushing for something and you're desperate to make it happen, and it may not happen, and you get tired enough and you've suffered enough that you genuinely just don't give a damn anymore. Whatever. Weirdly, that can give you access to equanimity. And I've watched people who are dying get to that place where the fear of dying is intense and the resistance to it is intense. But at a certain point, they're so tired and in so much pain that they lean into it and start to flood it with, I don't really care, which is equanimity. Not to reference any clothing related slogans in the past few months of American history. That to be kind of okay with anything, that is someplace you can get through suffering. You will eventually get there. Or you can re-access it if you've ever found it before. If you've ever just said, oh, I really don't care. I don't care if I lose this job. I hate it so much. I don't care if they, if they keep calling me names. Big deal. I'm just like, once you're completely full of this pain, you can flood it with equanimity by saying, whatever. Now, this is the key point. You've been identifying with the pain, which is why it's hell. You think this is how I feel. I was just watching this Australian comedian whose little son had a horrible bout of food poisoning. And when he was sitting on the toilet, things coming out both ends, he just looked up at his dad at one point and he said, well, I guess this is me now. And that is equanimity. But when you reach equanimity and you say, well, I guess this is me now, what happens is that the identification with suffering weirdly becomes detached from who you are. The little voice that said, I guess this is me now, was accepting the suffering and so was not inside the suffering. And we've done this before, where by contemplating and by visualizing, we reach a part that is outside of the suffering, that is watching the suffering. And in this case, filling, flooding, permeating, soaking through the pain, so that the whole thing starts to kind of, instead of being a massive, jagged and horrible detritus, it starts to float almost in the equanimity. And you're watching it float inside you. At this point, what you need to do is start sampling different thoughts to see what in your suffering, what in hell is poison, and what is medicine. And it's not hard. The poison takes you into toxic spaces where you feel more and more and more locked in. Anything that makes you feel more shackled, as we say in my coaching tradition, it's a toxic thought. It's a toxic reaction. Anything that makes you feel unshackled, even if it's something like, oh, well, I guess I'll accept that I'm going to die. The Buddha used to say that you can always recognize enlightenment because no matter what form it takes, it tastes of freedom. So if the thought, oh, I can just stop fighting, is true for you, it will feel liberating. If it's false for you, it won't feel liberating. I had a problem where I was thinking, oh, I need to get used to the good things never happening. And in fact, a certain good, it was which house we would buy, right? And a certain good thing wanted to happen. I kept saying, no, it doesn't matter. But it wouldn't go away. That put me in a dark, toxic spot. And then I tried saying, well, what if I weren't afraid of losing that? And I thought, oh, then it would feel that would feel much more free inside me. So no one thought or one procedure is right for every occasion. Whatever takes you deeper in is toxic. Whatever starts to send you out is medicine. And when you see what's toxic, it will be linked to a thought that drives you deeper and deeper into misery. Try pretending that the opposite is true and see if that makes you feel more free. So you flip the things that feel like poison, and the opposite of the poisonous thoughts are the medicine. So if you're thinking, no one will ever love me, the opposite is everyone will always love me. That thought, the opposite of your worst thought, is your path to freedom. So you keep flipping the things that are driving you down, 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 but you will still have legitimate grief, legitimate suffering, legitimate anger, and these things are meant to move you forward, to make you change things. So what you do is hold that suffering in the equanimity and watch it starts to dissolve. And generally there are waves of it. There are waves of suffering that come. And as you express that, especially if you have people around you who love you, each wave leaves you more cleaned out. It is a little like food poisoning. If you've ever had food poisoning, every time you throw up, you feel distinctly better because you're getting rid of the poison, and the body immediately registers, okay, what's left in me is good for me. So the legitimate grief, anger, or whatever, let it sort of dissolve and fill your consciousness so that the valley is still full, but now it's full. It starts to become warmer, and you'll find that what the suffering does as it dissolves in the light of your equanimity is that it becomes more fertile, more verdant. It brings spring to Valley Forge. And the more suffering there's been, the more fertile and beautiful and nourishing the land is. And that is the use of suffering, that it makes you a source of nourishment for other people who are in pain. So that's the process. I know it's a little complex, but it sure helped me. Does anybody have any questions?
Comment from Lara here.
Yes. I love a good puke metaphor. It really is. Read Sartre's work, Nausea. You'll love it. Alexa says, Martha Beck, how do you be okay and allow pain from the past traumas that come up? We just had that happen with a friend of ours. Get reinforcements if you can. I've had people who know they're coming out of a traumatic background, and I have them make a list of people they can call if it just gets too much to bear. The reason it gets too much to bear alone is that you don't have any new thoughts other than the ones you've already got. Get someone with you who loves you, a therapist, a family member, a friend, anybody, and go to an AA meeting, whatever, and express your suffering to them. And very likely they can give you a perspective that starts to liberate. They will probably be able to see things that you aren't able to see. And trauma locks you into a very few limited choices. And somebody who's not in your position can almost always see that quite clearly. And people who are training as coaches know it doesn't take a lot of training. You can get that from a good hairstylist while she cuts your hair. You know, it's like we understand each other's pain better than we think. And as soon as somebody else gives you another perspective, it's as if you have a new direction from which equanimity can flow. And we just did that with a friend who had a trauma come up, and 3 people just sat around her while she cried, and we snuggled her and loved her. And then she just cried and cried for a while, and then she just said, thank you. And she was starting to get better right there. So reinforcements are awesome. If you don't have any, read a good book. Okay, Jordy says, if you're a stress response, like shame, and you can't discern what type of thought it is, what do? Do you come back to body sensation? Yeah, I always do, because everything flows through this incredibly sophisticated nervous system. But remember, I feel like consciousness briefly seeming to occupy the body of a primate animal. And the animal is incredibly sophisticated, but it's not as intelligent as consciousness. But if consciousness can wash through it, this is filling the valley. You can see where most of the pain is. And if it's locked in a certain part of your body, you can begin to describe it physically. Like, oh, it's about as big as a baseball. It's covered with spiky points. It's freezing cold. It's heavier than the world. You start to describe that, and then emotion words will come on top of that. So you say, oh, that's shame. That's shame. And then you notice equanimity says, no, that's not medicine, that's poison. That's not medicine, that's poison. And you can actually imagine taking pain, once you've imagined its physical shape, take it out and put it in front of you. Those same psychologists who did the studies on suicide, or they wrote about this. Imagine it coming out, this spiky black ball of shame. You put it in front of you and you say, am I willing to put it back into my body? Likely it will say no. You will say, no, I don't want that. So you push it to one side and you find the resistance to the shame. And it's like, oh, no. Okay, that's fear. Where is it in the body? Oh, that's a spider web across my whole head and shoulders. Okay, take that out, put it down. Are you willing to be with that? Are you willing to let it back in? No. Okay, push that to the side. Now say, where's my resistance to the spider web? Okay, it's a light in my heart. Okay, take that out, put it there. Are you willing to take it back? Oh, yes, I can take that. I put it back in my chest. Then look at the first thing, the black ball of shame, and ask yourself this question, has it changed? And I look at mine, and what's happening is it's wilting, and it's soft, and it's more like one of those squishy super balls that you can use, and it's actually, it could be fun to play with. So I look at the cobweb, and it's gone gold, and it's spun gold. And I'm like, okay, put that back in. It's spun gold. And then they take the fuzzy thing and put it in my chest, and it's okay. I do not know why this visualization works so well, but I've done it with hundreds of clients. And if you can visualize a sensation as being in the body at all, it's incredibly powerful for some unknown reason. I do not know. But it's a wonderful question. And if you didn't get all the instructions, you can just replay the video. I do that a lot with myself, and it's really helpful. Donna says, how do you overcome the habit of avoidance of fear of suffering to be able to lean into the suffering and name it? I have a lifetime of distracting from the suffering and trying to avoid it, yet it simmers underneath. The habit of distracting with work, with social media, with self-help books is so deeply rooted in me. How do I access the pain to be able to release? Well, you're creating a safe space for yourself with the avoidance, and that's a good thing. So don't like blame yourself for that. It's a good place to store. It's okay to store your pain and let it simmer underneath while you distract in order to get things done in the world. In one self-help book I love, they call this denial with a little d. You just say, oh, I'm going to pretend all that pain's not there for a while. Perfectly legitimate as long as you acknowledge that it's there. And then there's a time when you can't hold it back. So distracting is fine. It's interesting, in tribal societies, they use ceremony for this. And what they do is they put themselves in circumstances that are more simple, less distracting, like a sweat lodge. It's just a dark, like a Stygian dark place underground with these red hot, white hot stones, and they make it more uncomfortable. It's a strange thing. In a lot of tribal ceremonies, you go into a very simple space, like a darkness where you can't be distracted, and then you actually undergo some kind of physical discomfort. Why? Because it breaks through the shell of denial, with a little d, that's been holding all that pain at bay. And then you start the emotional vomiting, it comes up. The poison comes up from that. And if that doesn't happen to you, I mean, if you don't want to go to a sweat lodge or whatever, let life do it for you. When we first got here, my family and I, we had several days with almost no sleep. And we were exhausted. We'd like walk up a flight of stairs and be because of pure sleep deprivation. And everything was new, which makes things a little higgledy-piggledy inside your head. But I didn't mind that because I knew that I had any loss or change brings up grief for anything. Even people getting out of prison grieve the loss of their routine. And I knew I needed to feel that. And the sleep deprivation was helping me not brace. So it was keeping me from huddling away from the valley of pain. It just let me go, bleh. And, there's a softness to it then. So actually allowing life to bring you ceremony, inviting life to bring you ceremony in the way of tribal peoples is one way to get through distraction. Another way is to sit down and say, I am distracted, and I will flood that with equanimity. Anything that happens, you flood it with mindfulness and equanimity. I'm present here with you. I'm watching you. I'm describing you. I am peace. And it's remarkably effective. I hope it works for you. And life will bring you suffering soon enough. Tracy says, can you achieve equanimity around an uncertain future? Why, Tracy? Strange you should ask. Yeah, I just went through a couple of months of intense uncertainty. And what it forced me to do was develop more equanimity. And this is what I meant about when the valley has been fully flooded with equanimity, it becomes more verdant, more nourishing, and bigger. You'll find that the suffering and the uncertainty above all else, it forces you into what the Asians call don't know mind. I don't know what is going to happen to me. And that's okay. Not knowing is okay. Like in Maria Shriver's newsletter today, I have a little essay about riding the ox backwards. That is an Asian metaphor for the ox is your Buddha nature, and you ride it backwards once you really have your balance and equanimity. You ride it backwards because you give up even the idea of knowing what's coming. You are calm enough and playing the flute, because you trust your essential nature and the power of the world that's represented by the ox so much that you're willing to ride it backwards. And I, at one point in the last few days, said, I want to learn to trust the world. And I sat down and I flooded the valley of my uncertainty with equanimity. And I said, show me why I should trust. And then about 5 minutes later, I burst out laughing because there are so many times in my life when I have been so cared for by the universe, by people, by animals, by plants and rocks and rivers. I just started to laugh hysterically, like, there's a net. I'm so afraid of falling off the tightrope, and the net is like 2 feet below me, and it has always caught me. And in times of uncertainty, when you come to that realization and you're riding the ox backward, what you get is this huge happiness, this beautiful joy that comes from not knowing what's going to happen, but believing and trusting that it will be what's right for you. So yeah, it's a good place to develop equanimity. Just like a muscle, the more challenging the circumstance, the better it builds the muscle. So Carol, hi Carol, says, oh, I love John O'Donohue, right? When one of you in a relationship is going through the Badlands, it's up to the other to carry the chalice of the relationship to the pasture. Oh, that's beautiful. That is love against which I have no defense. That is so gorgeous. And it's often true. In this case, my entire family was feeling pretty uncertain and shaken up. Even Adam, who is my Zen master, he's like, I don't like all this new stuff. So what happened is friends gathered around us and gave us love, joy, a place to stay. And I know that I'm super lucky and super blessed, and this hasn't always happened to me. But the more I trust the world, the more it is able to support me. And I could feel, like the other day when our friends started crying, I could feel the forces of love trying desperately to reach her. And that's why it pulled the three of us. 3 friends came together. And this woman was, she was in bed. We thought she was asleep. And then we heard a strange sound and she was crying. And then later she told us she thought that she was actually screaming. I think she was half asleep. She thought she was screaming, somebody better find me. Someone needs to find me. And 3 people were drawn in to circle around her. And I could feel that we weren't just 3 people. The 3 of us were being operated by the same intelligence, which loves this woman so much. And when you feel it coming through you and not just to you, that's when you know it's real, because there's no reason for you to be having this flood of love. it's not because you want to receive it, it's because it wants to go to someone else. And you can sort of watch it and go, oh my God, there's that much love for each of us. There really is that much love for each of us. So, mon laisse now, I didn't have time to read that out loud, but we've come to the end of the half hour. But I hope this helps you. And just to remember that hell is always here. And everything real is trying to help us stop suffering. Everything wants to get us out of hell. And by dropping into hell and coming out of hell, 1,000 times I've used Dante already with you guys, but you go through the center of the earth and all of a sudden you're headed up toward paradise. And I'm mixing metaphors here. But as you step back from your pain and flood it with equanimity and then allow poisons to come out and medicines to sink in, you gain wisdom. And the next time pain comes, wisdom is there to help. And we are all here to help each other. And I see you talking to each other in the gathering room. And that is all part of it. We are all part of the force that is flooding in to love and help everyone stuck in hell. I love you from New Jersey, just like I loved you from California. And now we will say goodbye for another week. Mwah, mwah, mwah.